I'm Phil McFall. Been an EMT for just over 10 years now with Summit County Ambulance. We work in a broad spectrum of environments: extreme cold, extreme heat, and altitude. Dr. Beck here has joined us for some questions here I have. We had a quick chat this morning over coffee, and I have some questions for him. Dr. Beck.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming. I would say it'd be safe to say between 60 and 70% of our patient contacts between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Can be traced to dehydration. Folks have cardiac, diabetics, even epilepsy can be exacerbated at these altitudes. What could oral IV do to restore these patients?
Well, dehydration is ever present. We see that in tons of populations at different altitudes. But of course, up here, it makes a dynamic difference. When you have change in atmospheric pressure on the body, all the cells of the body feel that. It can tend to lean more towards dehydration due to that pressure, because of course water is moved upon by that pressure. It changes the osmotic type of acts between cellular membranes. So one of the things that oral IV can be very beneficial in that regard is by restoring or increasing membrane potential in patients' membranes, so that way whatever interventions that you use for rehydration, because sometimes you're going to need to do it orally, sometimes it calls for different intravenous solutions and things of that nature. Regardless of which one a medical professional is actually going to use in the patient, oral IV becomes very beneficial as an adjunctive to kind of get the environment started to actually receive that type of intervention, based upon the patient's stats and what we're trying to remediate.
Okay. In the field, if we have a patient test positive for orthostatic hypotension, hypotension, we see and interpret this as a volume issue.
Right.
If they can't keep anything down, obviously we're going to have stomach cramps, nausea, vomiting, and one of the symptoms is they can't keep anything down.
Right.
And so they try to drink water, comes back up. So our next solution is IV therapy with basic. We don't do any lactate rangers in the field. It's just basic sodium chloride.
Right.
I see in the directions you can take a ½ ounce capsule. How will this bring back, just taken alone, how will that bring back the person from a orthostatic state?
Sure. Well, first of all, let's clarify that oral IV doesn't provide any more volume than the 15 milliliters that's in that vial. You still need volume. That's why, along with the directions, we do recommend, of course, water consumption to go along with it. So if we have a particular individual who has, an induced, hypotensive, state like that, medical professionals are trained exceptionally well on how to deal with that. There's a couple of challenges, though, that I usually like to talk about when I'm actually briefing or talking with medical professionals. And one is to keep in mind that not every state of dehydration in a patient is the same. That individual patient has a very specific history to themselves based upon their diet, sodium consumption, how much exertion for the day, have they had diuretic, effective drinks, how much exertion have they been at, what's their core temperature, blood sodium levels. There's just a lot of factors. And when you respond to a scene, of course, you're not always going to have the ability to quickly determine all those kind of things. So, of course, the correct intervention is to integrate with the patient, talk about, get feedback, and collect data from the scene from either the patient or individuals around. And then, of course, to lend assistance, to the heart, which is at the core of why this is having an issue, is to raise the feet above the pelvis and heart level, so that way we can make the stress on the heart not have to work so hard to move the volume, regardless of if it's a volume issue or an electrolyte issue. So one of the things I usually like to examine a little bit more further is the fact that in the United States, nobody is really sodium deficient. Actually, just last month, Journal of American Medical Association came out with a whole new aspect on advice of saying, hey, listen, we really need to remind people that we're over-consuming sodium. The body alone holds upwards, depending upon weight and size, 80 grams of sodium in a day. We will throw into digestion and absorption 10, 20, sometimes 30 milligrams at a time to match 1 to 1.5 liters in there to do the food and absorb it back in. So the body has a very powerful and refined salt metabolism system. And so generally what I caution is remembering that even if you have hypovolemic dehydration to where that particular patient has low volume, it still doesn't speak to the starting point of blood sodium concentration. So if we just go in and water down the blood, then what we actually can do is create a problem that we actually see in marathons and things like that, where you have an exercise-associated hyponatremia that, of course, if treated improperly, can create an encephalopathy even days later. So responding with just, say, a normal saline or an isotonic solution is the typical intervention at the scene. One of the things I like to recommend as some of the guidelines with that is if the patient is cognitive and you can talk to them openly about their particular situation, is to actually lend credence to the fact that the body has a very powerful system of handling dehydration on its own, and give them a small amount of water as tolerable and slowly work up over a short period of time, as opposed to jumping right straight to an IV therapy. Because when you do that, it doesn't take into account an unknown variable, and that is blood sodium concentration. So what ends up happening is that patients might not respond as quickly or in the best response by that type of intervention. So I like to take a little bit more conservative approach to situations that you might be running into like that. So to kind of recap, elevate the feet, make it easier for the heart to work, offer fluids orally. And the administration of oral IV right away is a great thing to do, because remember, the whole premise of oral IV is it helps increase the efficiency of water function. And it does so at the cellular membrane potential level, and it can help take that strain off of that mild electrical pulse, which is quite frankly interrupted when you have this particular kind of situation. So I think that type of approach serves the patient better, but at the same time I always do lend credence to the fact of a properly trained medic in that field to use their best judgment and do so. And even if they do decide to use an IV, based upon their knowledge and determination of the situation, oral IV is still going to be a very nice adjunctive because of the fact that it's going to help whatever hydration strategy we approach for our patients.
You mentioned marathon runners. We have an excellent ultra marathon up here, the Live at 100. Can one of these runners be, I guess, driven to a deeper state of dehydration if they just take the half-ounce capsule, continue running half-ounce capsule without replenishing the volume of water? Could that actually drive them deeper into... 100%.
The body still needs the volume, and oral IV doesn't supply volume. Matter of fact, it relies on volume for it to actually enact its potential. That's what's very valuable on that. So, of course, my recommendation is to follow the IMMDA guidelines for hydration therapy in exerted type of situations like marathons, regardless of altitude. There are some adjustments for that, because remember, everybody is dynamically different. So is their individual chemistry, so is their diet. So at the absolute first onset of thirst, that's a good clue that the hypothalamus is kind of regulating that, and to up to an 800 milliliter dose of water. And if your rate is exceeding that, then there might be some other underlying issues, but generally that's sufficient to keep someone hydrated. We are aware of the large amount of sweat loss volume as opposed to urine loss. And of course, there's a lot of things in play. There's an entire field of discussion and debate in this particular topic. But yes, you will drive a patient towards greater levels of dehydration if you even attempt to maintain hydration with oral IV only. We have to vehemently state that that is simply not the case of how it works. So you do want to rely on regularly accepted hydration therapy standards, but supplement with oral IV so that way it does its function more efficiently.
Gotcha. Yeah, reading those recommendations, that's one thing I think I would want to stress to the consumer is so they don't get that false sense of security where all I need are these capsules, and they can go in the field and operate without having the water as a...
Sure. Yeah, that would be dangerous. We definitely don't want to do that. That's not something we recommend. Even embroidered onto the side of each dose is to consume 16 ounces of water. because it is very important to realize that oral IV is going to help support that water's function, not replace it entirely.
Okay. We live at 10,400 feet up here. We deal with an extreme variance of temperatures, penetrating sun in the summer and in the winter, and we'll get down to minus 40 plus with wind chills. Will temperature have any effect on the chemical composition of oral IV?
Sure.
Second question, or part of that, is how long are those effects? We have a lot of search and rescue up here. We have deep insertion for wildland fires up here. We may have long-term operations for the SWAT team
Sure.
as well. So how long are the effects? And again, with those temperatures, will there be an effect on the chemical composition?
Sure, great question. Well, oral IV is very stable in the fact that we have to remember that the ions that we actually have in the actual product are absolutely ionic and dispersed in solution. They're not colloidal, so they're not a charged potential that allows them that are basically suspended in the solution. So with that, it actually makes them a part of the water signature. That's actually one of the actual merits to the science behind oral IV is its relationship to energy potential in the water that we manipulate. So to answer your question, we really recommend that you don't freeze oral IV. But if you do, thawing it back out, it will still have a viability. As far as exceeding temperatures, we like to have you keep it, of course, not to boiling or anything like that. Any temperature that the body would actually be able to physically withstand, oral IV will remain viable and stable.
And for like a long-term extraction for like a search and rescue, how long will that affect the patient?
Yeah, if you're at a stable temperature that's livable to maintain life for us as an organism, oral IV is going to be stable. We typically state that oral IV has a 5-year shelf life.
That was my next question. Strong word.
You got it.
And one final question: are there any contradictions to oral IV, whether it be a diabetic or allergies, pre-existing conditions, cardiac, anything like that?
Right.
Any contraindications?
I love it when medical professionals we get to talk about this, because this is the very important thing of it, because everybody's wanting to know, is it safe for me? Well, because the components of oral IV are derived from natural sources, we put them through a proprietary extraction and potentization and increase electronic potential. They don't have a chemical structure that is known to actually disrupt any type of medications or alter physiology to such deeper levels to where it would interfere with disease states. So my answer to that was, at this particular time, we don't know of any contraindications of that. It'd be very difficult to, even in the future as we continue to study this, because this is a new and emerging technology. It's a very glorious but difficult place to be when you are a one-of-a-kind type of thing, and lending scientific principles from a lot of different areas and applying into one place. And then as we move forward with this development and testing and things of that nature, we're going to get a greater insight. But even as that will progress here over the next year or so, there's really going to be difficult things to find that would even have the potential to have or yield any contraindications. We want to always stress to the individual that be self-aware and and to feel how it reacts to you, if any, and things like that. Dialogue with your healthcare practitioner, keep them in the loop. The other thing is we've been using the product now for 2 years and thousands of doses, and we've never had one single complaint or report of an adverse reaction. So the safety rating on it so far is pretty fantastic. And because it's a dietary supplement, it doesn't have the regulations of anything like that, the oversight. So that puts it also into a category that lends more to the fact that the things inside of it being a nutritive profile and benefit to the body aren't generally going to have a direct effect. So all the components of oral IV are generally regarded as safe.
Excellent. Dr. Beck, thanks for coming to
Thanks,
Colorado.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'm here with a test subject to demonstrate the actual method of action of the bioelectrical potential support that oral IV gives to cellular membranes. Because we can't, necessarily biopsy and grab other cells of the body. We will, utilize cells that we can readily access, and those being the blood. They themselves actually have a membrane potential on them between the ionic reaction of different species floating around in the blood. So this particular example is very straightforward and simple to understand. In the world of phlebotomy, back in the day, we actually used to, count cells that are in CBCs and stuff. So there's a lot of history to looking at cells through the body. And what we're going to simply do here is take a drop of the test subject's blood out of his finger, and we're going to put it on a slide. And then we're going to give them a dose of the oral IV, and we're going to wait a few seconds. And then we're going to take a second sample, either out of that same one, if it continues to flow, depending upon the chemistry of the blood. We'll sometimes close the wound up if it's thick or really dehydrated. But then what we'll do is in that second sample, we'll compare them side by side. Now we'll do so in such a fashion that actually make sure we don't traumatize the blood in any way by massaging the fingers or artificially, making those red blood cells stick together. And then, so that way they're in their natural state as they're circulating through the vascularity. So when we compare those two samples under the microscope, we're going to be able to see how the exposure of the increased bioelectrical potential that we actually get from a dose of oral IV affects cell membrane potential in the body. Okay? So we're going to get his little lancet ready here. First thing we want to do is just swab with an alcohol prep pad on any particular finger. And we generally like to get one here that's not as calcified, so it works a little bit better. So then we'll just let that dry. I don't massage that or anything of that nature. And I've got two slide covers here and one slide already, prepped. And so we're going to go ahead and pop a hole in that finger and gently let that blood come up and out until we get a uniform size dollop. Being careful to touch the slide to the finger, not the finger to the slide. So we'll get an adequate sample here. Okay. And then we're going to put that on the slide and hold on to that right there. And we're going to go ahead and twist off top of that, and I'm going to have the test subject go ahead and consume a vial of oral IV. And then in the meantime here, what we're going to do is see if we can't get another sample out of the same site. And again, we're not mushing it too hard to make it come out. We just want to encourage it to come out on its own. Okay. So then we're going to take an after sample. Give that a couple more seconds there. Okay. And you can go ahead and block the gauze pad. So what basically we can see over here the pre-sample. We're going to put the secondary afterwards. And one of the things I like to show right away is the fact that this blood dispersed pretty fast through the slide because now it has a greater charge, and this one kind of hit a little bit stagnant. So that's a pretty interesting phenomenon that's already representative of the electrical conductivity on the actual cellular membrane of the red blood cells.
Let's get a closer look at that.
Okay.
Because that other camera on not big. Good, good.
Okay. So we're going to put this under the microscope here. And remember, the first slide is over here on the right hand side. Move that over. Okay. And then we're going to get bring this into frame here. Okay. And that's on a particular magnification, and we're going to go ahead and go a little bit deeper here. So we get a really good close-up look. Wait for the camera to adjust the lighting settings. Okay, so here we have a whole bunch of red blood cells. You can see them moving around. They're in these individual little columns. Now the red blood cells actually still have the ability to do their job, because hemoglobin is a very neat little isomer. So it's going to be able to still maintain its function of transferring oxygen and carbon dioxide, all based upon electrical charge, of course. But you can see them, still have a little bit of movement in the screen, but they're still stuck together, pretty plumped up. So this is an example of when the patient is actually dehydrated. Their red blood cells still have enough to stay in circulation and serum. However, in relationship to each other, they're a little bit more disabled to actually do their job when it comes to facilitation of transporting, blood gases and so forth like that. So what we're going to do is then go ahead and just slide this over, keeping the same magnification. And then we're going to see a little difference in the two slides. Okay? So here in this particular slide, now we have a dynamic difference between the red blood cells. So you can see we still have some of them kind of stuck together, okay? But the vast majority of them are free, separate, and distinct. And that's because the actual membrane potential on red blood cells, okay, has a positive and negative, dipole charge. And when the body is dehydrated, it loses and reduces that particular electrical potential. So oral IV, not being an electrolyte replacement and not being a replacement of volume, what it actually does do is donate ion charge to the actual cells of the body that allow them to maintain their function more optimally and more efficiently. And again, I always want to stress that this is a very simple visual understanding of that membrane potential that we talk about and the method of action that oral IV actually works upon. The body still needs volume of water, the body still will need the larger electrolytes, sodium and potassium, but over stress and dehydration, temperature, pressure, exertion, the body expends those ionic charge potentials. And what this does is it goes in there and lends them as basically a little backup battery.
All right, Phil.
Sure.
Right now, any physical manifestation of your imbibing of the oral IV?
Not feeling a difference, but obviously I can see a difference here with the labs.
Okay, well now you've seen just about everything that I've seen. You've seen all the information that I've gotten. Let's talk about what this week was all about. About 8 or 10 days ago, a great controversy was started on the internet, at least in the firearms and training community, about the efficacy of oral IV, this product right here. This is actually a package that I showed earlier in the week that at one point it had 4 vials in it. You can see it has 2 vials in it. I'm continuing to use the product. I don't use it daily, but I've been up at 10,000 feet. Now I'm at 7,000 feet over in Eagle, Colorado, and out in the sun all day running classes. It's been kind of windy in the afternoon, the sun's been out, and I have been hydrating, and I've been using that as a hydration assister, what it is designed to do. Unfortunately, we found out that the controversy was funded and initiated and has been at least rallied all around by people who are selling and have a vested interest in a competing product that uses traditional technology. The reason that I got involved in the controversy is because I've used the product for over 2 years, and I believed that the product was doing something specific to help me in hydration. I never believed it was a sports drink. I never believed it was a replacement for all electrolytes. I certainly never believed that it was the equivalent of water, even though that a rather dubious analysis was done on the product to isolate simply what ingredients could be seen by a certain type of analysis, and the quality and type of ingredients not being really specific. You've heard the science. What we did was we invited Dr. Anthony Beck, the founder and creator of Oral IV, to find me, to come find me on a day off, and we'll do this. And he felt an urgency. He found me in Leadville, Colorado, flew to the middle of the country in Denver, drove 2.5 hours up into the mountains, and spent a day and a half at 10,000 feet doing video work with me and Phil McFall, an emergency medical technician. The point was not for me to become a defender of Oral IV, and I know that's the way a lot of people see me. The reason, for example, that I added the Oral IV to the store was to support the company whose product I believe in. They lost a lot of retailers, they lost a lot of distributors this week because of the controversy. I don't think that a product that so many people are getting such amazing results out of should be bullied out of the industry by people who are using a traditional approach and can simply point a finger and say, well, this doesn't work or can't work, when really the fact is they may simply not understand the processes involved. Maybe they do understand the process involved, but it's not their process, so they have a vested interest in undermining its legitimacy. I do say that I heard everything Dr. Beck had to say. You heard the interview. Hopefully you watched the longer video 3 in this series, where I questioned and answered him, or I questioned him and he answered. And there were some things I was very curious about. There are things that he wasn't talking about prior to that Q&A that needed to be talked about, that needed to be said. Some mistakes that were made in the verbiage that was used on the website, things like not having the expiration date that they're going to address, obviously not having had tests done, not having the independent test done, which I think is really the root here. We need to have those studies done. We need to have those independent blind research tests done. If the people with a vested interest in seeing this product leave the market had funded their own test and shared the results, I wouldn't think it was shady or underhanded at all. I think that's legitimate. That makes a lot of sense, especially if they really thought that people were going to be put in danger through the use of this product. I think that to rely on a critique of what the product claims to do simply because it's not what your product claims to do or what the traditional method of hydration is weak. It's intellectually weak, and it may even go as far as to be intellectually dishonest. It's disappointing, and that's why I got involved in this. I don't think that the community should be tied to dogma. I don't think the community should be tied to tradition. Obviously, that's not my approach in training. My approach has never been to say, well, this is how we've always done it, so let's not look for something new. You know, I'm sure the people who built the best carburetors in the world resisted the concept of fuel injection, and I'm sure I could go down a list of examples and people on the internet can tell me why it's not valid, but the simple fact is this is either completely useless or it's a new technology. It's a disruptive technology, as Dr. Beck said, because it disrupts the paradigm, it disrupts the status quo. You know, teaching unsighted fire before sighted fire is a disruptive approach to defensive shooting training, and that's what I've done for over a decade, and we've had a great amount of success with it. And we've had the studies, we've conducted the experiments, we've had people with no shooting skill go through that process, and you know, still people will snipe at us and say, oh, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, you can't do it. And certainly people on the internet have said, well, you know, Pincus has a non-traditional approach to everything he does, and he's controversial, so no wonder he jumped in the middle of this. That's fine. One controversy that came up was because I started selling the product, people assumed that I had some kind of profit motive in sharing this information, in becoming this, you know, advocate for oral IV. The reality is that I wanted to share the opportunity to use the product, and I wanted to support the company. So what I've decided to do is donate any and all profit from the sale of oral IV from the ICE training company store to a veterans charity, and I'm going to continue to do that for the time being. I think that that's a fair misunderstanding of the situation, so we're going to take that out of the equation. I want people to have this information, I want people to make their own decision on oral IV, and I want people to have access to it, and I do want to support Dr. Beck. I believe he is very sincere. I want to support the company. I think that everybody who's marketing it and selling it believes in it. So if I'm going to put my reputation on the line, it's going to be, maybe I'm a horrible judgment character, maybe I'm horribly wrong here, but I don't think anybody there is purposefully defrauding anyone in the sale of oral IV, or certainly I wouldn't sell it. I know that I've had results with it, so I'm going to continue to use it. I know that you know, whether or not I believe in the product, I don't know. There were things said in the science part of this, the discussion of how it works and what works, that I don't understand, that are beyond my medical knowledge. And there are people who are well trained in the traditional medical approach who have said that they don't understand it either. Because people don't understand the process or haven't really been given access to the process to prepare the ingredients that are in oral IV, I don't know that anybody outside of that, people inside the process, are really qualified to say that can't work. Again, if it's new technology, if it's a new approach, then the most established experts so far who don't have the knowledge of what's going on in there can't say that it can't work. They can say they don't understand it, they can say that they're skeptical, they can say that they think it's safer and smarter to stick with a traditional approach. I get all that. But what they can't say is that it can't work. I'm sure plenty of people have said that new technologies can't work or impossible or dangerous. Maybe the only thing it's dangerous to is the status quo. So you decide. You've got the information. I would be careful of what experts you trust. I don't claim to be an expert in hydration or medicine, but I do claim to be maybe at least an expert in sharing information. I've done that as my career, and I wanted to share this information with you. I wanted to give Oral IV a chance to share their information with you, and I hope that you take that for what it's worth and understand the motive that I had was to make sure that the community got the information and that Oral IV got a fair shake.